Good morning, everyone. And Bryant, thank you again. It's always fun working with you right across the way. And good morning, everyone. This is Margie Dean Gray with the Foundation here at Fort Lewis College, and welcome to Notes and Notables. And finally, I think spring is around the corner. I think every time that I come on the air, I tell you to grab a cup of coffee or hot chocolate because it's so cold outside. And maybe today we can actually get by without having some snow like we did last week. But as you all know, my favorite thing to do is introduce people in the community, the Fort Lewis community as well as the Durango community that you may or may not know, but have really made a difference in a number of ways for Fort Lewis. And today my guest is J.C. Perteet, who's the engagement specialist with the Foundation and Alumni Relations. And you're going to get to know a little bit more about J.C. She's been on campus for about 5 years. We may not have had the opportunity of getting to know her because she has been behind the scenes a little bit. Now we're trying to put her in front of the scenes, and she's been doing a great job with communicating with our alums. So let's start off, as we always do, with introducing you to J.C. and letting her tell you a little bit about herself. So J.C., good morning, and thank you for being here.
Good morning, Margie. Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it. I am a person who I was born and raised in Kansas City, and trying to think of my life history. There's a lot of history, and I don't want to bore you all with a lot of it, but a quick overview. I went to school to Kansas State University, and there I learned about French, and I got very interested in the French culture and the French language, and I met a professor who encouraged me to go for a summer to Paris. And when I went to Paris, I went to the Sorbonne. It was fabulous. I met another professor who taught at KU, who talked me into going to KU and taking classes with her. And then she also encouraged me to go to school in France, where she went. She went to the L'Université de Grenoble. And so she helped me get enrolled there. And then from there I moved to France and went to school for a year in the mountains, in the Alps. It's at the base of the Alps, and I think there was Winter Olympics that was held in Grenoble maybe in 76 or 80. I don't know. But and it was there that I fell in love with the mountains, having grown up in the flatlands of Kansas. And so Durango, now living in Durango, is a great place.
Well, let's go back a little bit to your studies in Paris and sort of, that's kind of a big step. Even though Kansas City is a big city and you're used to that kind of life, going over to France, and you obviously spoke French probably beautifully in order to get around. But what was your real goal in going to France, other than just sort of studying the culture? Had you hoped to one day move there like you eventually did, or were you thinking about teaching? Why did you decide you wanted to kind of leave the U.S. and kind of your formal way of living to do something very different? I think it's adventuresome, certainly. I think it's great, but why did you do it?
Well, adventuresome is a good word for me. I've always been a pretty adventurous person, even as a child. I had no problem in going up to strangers, talking to them, meeting them, finding out more about them. Yes, Kansas City is a very large city, but to me it was hometown, and it seemed very small. And I really wanted to go explore the world. And when I had the opportunity to go to France, it was very, very exciting to me. It was kind of terrifying, but it was also exciting. But the first time I went to Paris, to the Sorbonne, it was with a group. So that was kind of comforting. There were other students and people that I had been going to school with, so it wasn't as terrifying. The second time when I went back, I was by myself, and that was a bigger step, but I think it made me a really independent person, and I went because I envisioned myself that I was going to work in the United Nations. I was going to be a very worldly individual who did translations, and I would live in New York, and life is funny how it takes different directions. And when I came back from, I ran out of money. So
as most of us do
when I was in Europe, I ran out of money and I came back, but I was imbued with this sense of work ethic, because I don't know, the Europeans they experienced such a different life than we had in the United States. I met people who had been invaded in France when the Germans invaded France, and they had to trade their rations for different things. And I had never encountered such things of people who had that kind of experience. We were kind of cushy here in the United States. So when I came back, I went to work, and then from there, fell in love, got married, had children.
Well, when you were over in France, I'm sure because you wanted to learn more about the culture, not only of France, did you have an opportunity of doing some traveling, whether it was with friends or by yourself in other parts of Europe, that sort of opened your eyes? Again, we talk about cushy back here in the States, and we certainly have had that, though we've certainly had our ups and downs as well. But did you go over and sort of do some more exploration, and that also told you more about who you are as an individual?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was interesting because the other students that I met, they were from all over the world and had lived all over the world. I had a roommate who, her family was from New York, and her father worked for the Ford Foundation, but she grew up in Kenya. And then I had another roommate who was British, and oddly enough, she had grown up in Kenya as well. So we were kind of the three amigas, I guess. And we did travel. We went up to Amsterdam. We went to Paris. We went down to Spain. We went to the coast of in Perpignan and went sailing. I mean, we were pretty wild girls. And yes, we did hitchhike.
Don't tell your mother.
Because we were poor.
Which is done, of course, over in Europe, definitely. I asked if you'd learned about yourself through your adventures, and when you went over there, you had certain goals in mind, certainly, that you met. And then when you went out to sort of explore the world, what new things? You mentioned you felt that you were much more independent the second time around because the first time kind of gave you that security. What else did you learn about yourself as a single woman over in Europe, hitchhiking, though I'm sure you didn't tell your parents you were hitchhiking, around the country, around the world?
Well, I thought it was a very empowering experience because it was just me. As an adult, I turned 21 when I was in France, and which is the kind of the marker in the United States for becoming an adult. But for myself, trying to think of what I learned, it's so intuitive. It wasn't like a conscious thing, but I think that it gave me a tremendous amount of confidence and just the experience of not being worldly, but of having exposure. It's just for me. I would consider myself an active learner, and that has not changed through the course of my life. And so, just the opportunity to have so many new things constantly available, to go to see art, to see the countryside, to experience food. All those things are just, I love all those things.
Did you think that you would do those kinds of things? Did you think you'd have sort of the courage, in a sense, to do all of those things when you're in the States thinking about, going over to France the first time and especially the second time? Did you have, was that like, yeah, these are things I want to take care of?
No, I would say that I never think about those things when I take on, I see things, I see an opportunity, they're attractive and I want to go do them. It's only afterwards that I think, wow, that was kind of risky. That could have been dangerous, particularly the hitchhiking was probably not the best idea. And actually we only needed 3 rides to go 14 hours.
Wow. Not bad.
They were long rides, and one of them gave all of us girls a very serious lecture about how dangerous of an activity we were engaging in and that we shouldn't do that. And so we said, okay.
Did it change your mind? I mean, did you stop doing it, or did you continue on knowing that you didn't have much money to be able to afford transportation?
No, I think youth gives you a sense of confidence that may or may not be real. But for me and for us, it worked out.
Well, that's good, because you're still here.
I'm still here.
Which is great. As long as your family didn't know it, then I think you're probably pretty safe. You know, you mentioned that the reason you came back is because of lack of money, and that happens to all of us, you know, especially as youngsters. You know, you sleep in wherever you can find a bed and eat whatever you can find, you know, in a little store. If you hadn't run out of money, would you have stayed there, do you think?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, like permanently, or?
Yes, I think I could have done that under the right circumstance. I really am attracted to, well, it's just different. The culture is different. The routines are different. The lifestyle, how people, one of the things I miss the most is the passion that people have without anger of discussing their points of view, that you can be very passionate and very committed to your point of view, and you can discuss an opposing point of view with someone else, and that's almost not only acceptable but expected.
Yeah,
that's
right.
You have a position, you go for it, you talk about it.
I'm sure you kind of came over as a young woman and came back a, you know, very mature woman with, you know, all these experiences, you know, that you were able to have during that time.
Yeah, I think so. But it was very exciting for me, and I think it's helped me throughout my life. That experience has helped me deal with the many different situations that I've come across, of being in with a large variety of different kinds of people who have a completely, that nobody's related to anybody in their types of experience, which kind of makes me a great candidate for the job that I'm doing now, working with alumni, because I talk to so many different people who come from so many different backgrounds, from their degrees to the business that they work in, to the culture that they came from. But I think that my experience in going overseas really helped develop that, so that I could roll with whoever I was talking with.
Well, you mentioned you came back to the States and you'd fallen in love with the mountains over there because you were from Kansas. So tell us a little bit about how you ended up here at Fort Lewis or in Durango, and you can tell as much or as little as you want.
How much time do you have? Let's see. So I came back to the States, went back to Kansas City, was working, went out to see my brother, who was living in Gallup. He was working in the coal mine there. And I met a group of people that were fabulous. They were moving to San Francisco and invited me to move too. And I said, why not?
Right. So, I go to France, I can go to San Francisco.
That's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
And so I moved out to San Francisco. I lived there for a year. Wonderful. Love that city. Never drove anywhere. Took the bus or Muni all over the city. Walked everywhere, and enjoyed it. And then met a man. This is a common theme in my life. And he moved to Farmington. And so I followed him to Farmington, New Mexico, which put me into the mountains, the Four Corners area. I'm getting closer. And that one didn't work out, but I met the father of my children in Farmington, and so got married. My son was born in Farmington. My kid's father was born and raised in Durango. So there's the
connection.
Ding, ding, the connection. And it was his desire to always come back and be able to live in Durango, but that was in the 80s, and at that time it was pretty hard to come in and just move into Durango. With the advent of the internet, it became much easier for people to bring their businesses here, and it took us until 93 to be able to move to Durango, and we ended up living in Bayfield.
Well, I want to talk in a few minutes when we have time at the very end about your kids, because I think they both have two very interesting positions, and I think you've raised them beautifully.
Thank you. I think they're fabulous.
I hope so. But so then how did you so you came here and you settled in and you had your business and you were sort of working with that. And then once you decided to leave the business, why Fort Lewis?
Well, by this time, I was an empty nester, and I loved being a mom. Being a mom was a fabulous job. And Fort Lewis kind of was an opportunity to re-engage with kids. And so I thought, well, I would really enjoy working up there. And I had, in the 90s when the program for the Japanese exchange students was very active in 91, 92. And my children and I, we hosted a pair of Japanese students from Fort Lewis, at our house for a couple of weeks. And that was awesome. That was a great experience. And that kind of got me introduced to the college. And so knowing that there were students up here, that there were young people, I put in an application, and it took a long time to get a job up here. I had 3 other job offers at other places, and I held out for Fort Lewis. Oddly enough, as you'll hear eventually, is that the adventure education program was still being created, and Trish, the human resources person, had told me about it, that might be something that would be available when they had an opening that she thought I would be good for. But in the meantime, they had an opening in housing. So I came up and interviewed for the housing position and got the job, and then got to work, started to work with the college.
And I'm assuming you felt really comfortable where you were, and knowing that you possibly might be moving in other directions on campus, but that the housing is, I think, a fabulous way to start, because you're learning about every aspect, about
yes.
student
I learned
life, faculty life, everything else.
I got a really good overview of the campus and how the process worked of having students come in. My only not regret, but maybe caveat with that was that I worked with the judicial coordinator, who handles all the disciplinarian cases of students. So the students that I was interacting with, for the most part, were not very happy because they were kind of in trouble. But overall, it was a great training ground. I got familiar with pretty much all the processes that happened on campus. And then the adventure education program.
Well, before we get into the adventure education program, if you're just tuning in, this is KDUR, and I'm Margie Dean Gray, your hostess for the morning, and for Notes and Notables. And my special guest today is engagement specialist J.C. Perteet, who works mostly with alums, but she does a lot of things within the foundation and the college as well, and just doing a great job. And we're sort of starting to get into that part of her life right now. She mentioned adventure ed just a few minutes ago, and she really, I think, kind of helped turn that department around, from being sort of new and what do we do on campus to sort of where the success that it is now. So I want to kind of jump into that, JC, as to when you decided to go from housing to the other position, and sort of what it was like when you first started and what happened when you left.
Well, when I first started, the position had not existed prior to that. So it was awesome. I got to totally create the position and all the processes, all the policies, everything of how things were happening. About the same time, I saw a gentleman on a talk show. I can't remember which one. His name was Gary Vaynerchuk, and he did a thing called Wine Library, which was a hugely popular internet show about wine tasting. And he did it in a very unusual and creative way. He used a Jets bucket for this to spit out the wine, and he always had them in a paper bag. Very creative. You should look it up if you have the time. But he was promoting a book called Crush It, which was about using social media to market yourself or your product. And I love that. I love marketing. I love business development. I love advertising. And so I got the book, and I told my boss, who was Bob Stremba, the director of the program here at the college, that I wanted to try this social media for adventure education. And his feeling was, okay, whatever. as long as it doesn't interfere with your job, you can do whatever you want. And so I built a group page, a Facebook page for Adventure Ed. I redesigned the website, started a blog, and it turned out to be a great vehicle for students to meet other students, for prospective students to kind of spy on what the program was about without revealing themselves or their intent of whether they wanted to come to Fort Lewis College or they wanted to be in the program. And it went from, for Bob, from I don't care, it's great, do whatever you want to do, to what's that thing you're doing again, to can we go global with this? Mm-hmm. So it turned out to be a very, very good thing for adventure ed.
So were you sort of learning on the job? I mean, I know you well, and you get sort of a goal in your mind and you just go for it, which I think is wonderful. Did you, how much training had you had? I mean, how did you kind of figure out, do we need to be tweeting? Do we need to be blogging? Those kinds of things. And you might even actually want to explain sort of what you consider social media so that people, when we're talking, understand what you mean.
Sure. Well, the book Crush It that I started with, he pretty much laid out the groundwork of what type of platform you wanted to use, whether it was Facebook or if it was YouTube, or if it was Twitter. And I have a background in marketing and business development, so it was a natural fit. And I do believe marketing is just different vehicles of how you talk about your product. So, I'm trying to think. So it was just go, read, learn. He ended up, Gary Vaynerchuk wrote 2 more books, of which I purchased them all, have read them all. I firmly believe he's like a superstar for social media. And then lots of research, because the internet is an endless source of information, and I do love research, and I do love information, and it's been fun because it's very playful to me, the social media, which is Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. I mean, there's so many new things coming along all the time.
And do you use all of those avenues?
I do not right now, because my philosophy is I want to, have one and done, and make sure that it's up, it's running, it's solid, it's good, it's active before I move on to the next one. Because I don't think I can do a good service for our alumni if I'm
scattered.
I'm halfway doing this, halfway doing that. So as far as alumni, what I'm doing for them right now, we have a pretty solid Facebook page. Mm-hmm. That's Fort Lewis College Alumni. It's a fan page on Facebook. We're pretty active. We have a lot of people participating. The alums we have a lot of fun on that page. We're building LinkedIn, which is a professional network online. And the LinkedIn group is growing more and more, and they're becoming more active. They're participating. There's a lot of discussions around what career or field of study they've gone into or what they'd like to go into. We have current students on LinkedIn asking for advice from older alums.
Wonderful, boy.
And they're giving great advice. There's a lot of participation. So it's been a great building process for alumni. I'm very happy to do it for the college.
We know, and you may not be quite aware of it, coming from a different department, but for years, we didn't have that person who has the knowledge that you have to really kind of get out there to represent the alumni or any other aspect of the college. And you've just been such a wonderful gift, because you know so much, and you're so as passionate. I mean, that's the word I always want to describe you as passionate, not only about everything you do, but especially social media and wanting to get that word out there to our alums. So I want you to, because unfortunately it gets closer and closer to our time to sign off, but can you tell me one story of how this reaching out to our alums has made such a difference to, sort of what we're trying to do in communicating with our alums? That I'm sure you have a million stories.
I was going to say just one story. There's so many of them, and that's what's so awesome is as we reach out and reconnect with our alumni, there's so many stories of what alumni are doing and how they're succeeding since they left college. I have 3 that I can think of off of the top of my head. The most recent would be Eric Kabul. He's a 90 graduate. He's a playwright. He just had his play, Velocity of Autumn, open on Broadway, and it's up for a Tony Award. I mean, How awesome is that?
Fabulous.
I mean, and that's one of our alums. And that's just one of our alums. And that's just this week. Also this week, we learned about Drew Walter, who's an '08 graduate, and he just won Young Botanist of the Year award from Botany, I think it's Botany of America. But it's awesome. And we have another graduate, and she's particularly interesting in that her name's Ramona Pearson. She graduated in '94. And while she was here, she was legally blind. She had a horribly traumatic accident that left her she should have died from it, but it left her blind. Her bones were crushed. She got hit by a car. And she came through that, came to school, got her degree in psychology from Fort Lewis. She went on. She's now the software developer for a personalized learning program and just received a $16 million venture capital
grant or
something. I'm not really sure in venture capital if it's a grant or a loan, but she just secured this financing, and she does wonderful TED Talks. She's a very inspirational, motivational speaker, and so much so her life story is being written by one of the screenwriters for Moneyball. Wow. And those are just 3 of our alums.
Right.
I mean, there's
many.
And every week I struggle to keep up with all of the great things that I'm hearing about so that I can share that with all of our alum on social media, because it's just so fabulous.
Well, I have one little story that I want to tell, actually, and I won't use any names because I don't want anybody to know that I'm using them as an example. But we did just recently have a former employee who is a graduate of Fort Lewis come back for a visit to Durango. And the college had made a decision a few months ago about something that he didn't agree with, and he wrote us back saying, I'm not going to go, as much as I love Fort Lewis, I'm not going to support it anymore, and don't ask me for any money, and that, on and on and on, how it is when people are that passionate. And which was a shame, because he was such a devoted graduate of Fort Lewis, and I sort of hated to hear this from him. And with you coming on board, you've reached out in so many different ways, personal ways to alums, and telling such great stories that have brought them back, that when he came to visit, he said how much he had enjoyed and appreciated what you were doing to pull alums back into the fold, so to speak. And he's almost done a 360. I mean, he really has just turned it around and just feels that because of you have done that for him. And I'm sure he's one of many who's thought, Fort Lewis never contacts me. All they want to do is ask for money. And yet, you're now in that position where you can say, you know what, we really do appreciate you and the fact that you are a graduate of Fort Lewis. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been great to be able to show the alums and whoever is looking at those things how much Fort Lewis cares about their students, about their professors, about their alumni, and how we can be of service to them and help them succeed, because their success is our success. That's the bottom line. Without them, we wouldn't be able to continue, because if we couldn't turn out a quality product like our alumni, we wouldn't be able to stay in business, if you will. Mm-hmm. So to be able to share that is fabulous.
Well, one quick thing before we have to sign off, and that is, where do you see social media going, especially for the college, since I'm not saying we're new at it, but we are pretty new at it in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see us going to really continue to reach out to alums?
Oh, well, there's so many platforms, and it's an ever-changing landscape, and hard to predict. I mean, we haven't even touched really into YouTube. We haven't fully utilized YouTube, although we do have Dwayne Smith's last lecture will be available on YouTube, and you can still see it on demand. We're doing live streaming. We haven't touched Instagram. We're just starting with Twitter, and those are established social media platforms. Who knows? Snapchat is out there. I know there's going to be more and different and varied things. So it's pretty exciting, because it's still an active learning process. You have to stay on your toes. You have to stay on top of things and go where the people are.
Well, I think that you're such a wonderful example of that, of wanting to learn more and more so that you can then help others, learning more about Fort Lewis. So thank you for being on today, JC. It's been a pleasure. It's always a pleasure working with you.
Oh, thank you, Margie.
And maybe the next time we'll have a chance to talk about Owen and Kat, her kids. That'll be the next continuing. So thank you all so much for joining us today on Notes and Notables. And appreciate all the support that you give us, and be sure and tell your friends that we're on Fridays at 9 a.m. and listen to all these fun people that we bring on. So thanks very much and have a terrific weekend. Bye-bye.